We'll jump to Tuesday's lesson, and we're going to read a little bit of the lesson. It says, in recent decades, much attention has been given to the stories about people who have died, in that their hearts have stopped beating and they have stopped breathing, only to be revived and brought back to consciousness. In numerous cases, many of these people have told incredible experiences of a conscious existence after they have supposedly died. Some talk about how they floated in the air and saw from themselves from above and their own bodies. Others report floating out in their bodies and meeting wonderful beings filled with light and warmth who espouse truth about kindness and love. Others recount meeting and talking to dead relatives. This phenomenon has become so common that it even has a scientific name, near-death experiences. Although near-death experiences remain controversial, many Christians have used them as evidence for the immortality of the soul and the idea that at death that soul goes off to another realm of conscious existence. But near-death experiences are, of course, another manifestation of one of the two great errors. One of the two great errors meaning immortality of the soul, which we skipped and I didn't have time to go into. Maybe I should back up and do that. Well, let's finish this paragraph. As long as anyone believes that at death the soul goes on living in one form or another, that person is wide open to most occult and spiritualistic deceptions, deceptions that can easily promote the idea of either openly or by implication that you don't need Jesus. In fact, most of the people who have had near-death experiences have said that spiritual beings whom they met, or even their dead relatives, gave them comforting words about love, peace, and goodness, but nothing about salvation in Christ, nothing about sin, nothing about judgment to come, and the most basic Bible views. And we'll stop with that. Let me just talk about near-death experiences, and if we have time, we'll go back and deal with the immortality of the soul question. Near-death experiences go back, these types of descriptions go back in various forms of literature and writing and historical record more than 2,000 years. They're reported by about 20% of people who suffer a heart attack and are revived from the heart attack. About 1 in 5 will report something like this. But what's interesting is that to have a near-death experience, you don't have to be near death. 1990 study at University of Virginia Health Science Center in Charlotte of 58 people who had near-death experiences found that half of them, 50% of them, would have survived without any medical care at all. In other words, they had an event, but it wasn't a life-threatening event. But they thought it was a life-threatening event. And because they thought it was a life-threatening event, they had a near-death experience. Something as innocuous as fainting can produce a near-death experience. There are many theories of what caused near-death experience, including hypoxia, lack of oxygen to the brain, which could trigger seizure in the temporal lobes, hypotension, loss of blood pressure to the brain, release of endorphins and enkephalins in the brain, producing various altered mood states. The brain, and if a resuscitation goes on, some of the medicines injected into the person to try to resuscitate them. These are all potential theories. But I think the best actual description of this was given by Kevin Nelson, a neurophysiologist at University of Kentucky. And has done research on near-death experience, and his explanation, and I think it's probably the most legitimate, is it's REM intrusion. REM intrusion, REM, rapid eye movement, sleep, and in REM you have dream states, and there's a disorder that people can get called REM intrusion where they actually have dreams while they're in a waking state. So if you look at brain waves, they have REM dreams going on, but they're not actually asleep. And so they have these experiences that seem extremely real to them, but they're actually in a sleep state. A study published in 1994 by James Limpert at the Rudolph Clinic in Berlin documented how volunteers made themselves faint through a combination of hyperventilating while seated, then standing and holding their breath, and they would faint. Many of those experienced euphoric, near-death experience sensations such as floating outside their body, entering another world, or encountering supernatural beings. Basically the same things from the other near-death experience.
You know, that's a YouTube phenomenon now.
They're doing that.
Yes.
Have this, yeah.
After the Tide Pods, they've transitioned to this.
It's thought to do to activating the vagus nerve, which stimulates the brain stem, which causes these near-death experiences. Now, I want to point out one thing that the lesson stated about the near-death. So, my view, first off, their definition of death, the primary problem with the whole near-death experience phenomenon is that their definition of death is not death. That's the primary problem. The heart has stopped. You know what? We do that to people every day across this nation when we do open heart surgery. We stop the hearts. And they're on a bypass machine. But the heart's not pumping. Do it all the time. Do that to people who get heart transplants. The heart has been shut down. Now, do we consider the person on a heart bypass machine while the heart's being taken out? They don't even have heart in their body now. Are they dead? No. This idea that if your heart stops, you're dead, is not true. If the heart stops and isn't restarted, or something doesn't start the circulation again, you will die shortly, but you're not dead yet. And that's part of the problem. They're describing people as being dead who haven't yet died. But now they're in a state of hypoxia, state of endorphin, state of adrenaline rush, state of all kinds of things happening in the body as it's fighting to survive. And they're going to get some strange experiences, but the brain is still active. So death, is how I define it, is necrosis. What's necrosis? Cellular death. The cells have rotted. Okay? When that happens, you've got somebody who's dead. Until that happens, and we're talking the brain now, because you can have the heart removed, and they can have remember the Jarvik heart? You can have a mechanical heart. That person's not dead, but that heart can now die and necrose, but that person's still not dead. We're really talking brain death. So the problem with the near-death experiences is nobody who's had one has actually died. None. Because none of them had a brain that rotted. Their brain stayed alive. And that's what's necessary for the person to die. So if you just remember that, it'll clear it all up. So whatever's going on here, it's not any evidence of what happens after a person dies, because they haven't died. So you can't have that evidence yet. Back to the question then, let's back up and close in the last few minutes with this question of immortality of the soul.